and dial again.
Call rejection, because some things should just be standard. Cut the blue wire. Get Rev Voice, save money.
Good evening, Bahamas. You're tuned into MB12 Weekend, broadcasting from Cable 12 Studios on Robinson Road. Coming up tonight in news, undocumented residents being denied NIB smart cards. A bit more details on how the new parole system is proposed to work. An investigation into Bahamian Time. Plus, as always, we count down the top quotes in news this week. I'm Paige McCartney. We've got those stories and more straight ahead on MB12 Weekend. Welcome once again to MB12. With more than 167,000 people already registered for the new National Insurance Board smart cards, officials say there is one segment of those living in the Bahamas who will be denied the new blue cards. According to Senior Deputy Director at NIB, Cecile Bethel, undocumented residents will not be registered under the new system, whereas in the past, they would have at least gotten an NIB number.
What we always have to do as government agencies is we have to work together. It cannot be that the National Insurance Board registers persons who the Immigration Department, given that their status is not legal, whom they have not approved that they should give, a legal residency to or a work permit to. And so we must be working in concert. We didn't always do that, and that is why there are some persons who are here illegally who currently have national insurance numbers, and they will have the yellow cards.
The practice had been that for decades, if an immigrant or undocumented resident, regardless of status, was able to prove that he or she was gainfully employed, they would be granted an NIB number and a yellow card. But Bethel says the board has taken this opportunity to better regulate the process.
I must confess, back in the very early days of the NIB, the National Insurance Program, the administration of the Social Security Program, everybody who was employed, whether you were here legally or not, obtained a yellow card. And in fact, some persons, even in a very early days would have had the white card, which was our initial card. They obtained the yellow card, or they obtained a national insurance number, regardless of their status. And we continued to do that over the years. But as I said, as we mature and as we think about ourselves as a government entity and ensuring that we work in concert with all other governmental agencies, then we must ensure that we close the gaps. And this is a gap that we are required to close.
The NIB executive said this process will also feed into who will be eligible to register for and enroll in national health insurance in a few months, and ensures that illegal migrants don't abuse a system designed for Bahamian citizens and legal residents. She said it's important that when registering, all residents have their proper documentation.
Remember, as we said, April 30th is the deadline, at which point we will rid ourselves of the yellow paper card. That will no longer be the official NIB card. For those persons who come to us now, because they do not have legal residency, they do not have a work permit, they don't have a legal status in the country, then we will not be able to produce or to give them one of the blue cards. And I suppose that is the little gray area, the little challenge, I suppose, that those persons have at this point. We're just not going to be able to do it.
Shifting to other news now, we're learning more about how government's proposed probation and parole system will work once legislation is passed and implemented. Deputy Commissioner of Corrections, Don Clear, who is among those spearheading the program, explains the plan is to implement two facets of the program, community parole and confinement parole, geared primarily toward medium and minimum security inmates at the Bahamas Department of Corrections.
Every time an inmate is sentenced, he's given 1/3 of a sentence automatically, based on our laws, for good behavior. Now, the concept of what we're trying to introduce now are two types of parole: community paroling and confinement parole. Now, the community parole is the one that we want to use that 1/3 that inmate is supposed to be going home. We want to put that inmate out in society, but put him under supervision. Now, he wouldn't go out there, or he or she wouldn't go out there unless they have a job, unless they are drug-free, unless they are either going into school, but our rules and regulation will be so strict that it is a process of us putting him out there just to see whether if he is reformed.
Confinement parole would be different, according to Claire, in that inmates would not be released fully into society and would undergo more stringent observation.
For example, with child sexual offenses. Now, those ones, we will not release them into society. These are the ones who will be housed at a living quarters at our institution and will be released like during a day release program. And upon completion of their official sentence, they can be released.
Claire says the concerns that members of the public may have regarding having hardened criminals released before their time should be lessened under this new system. He said, as it stands, a prisoner is simply released and left to their own devices, but under a parole system, they're guided by a trained professional to ensure they don't return to a life of crime.
Just doing a little survey of my own in the medium security prisons and the minimum security prisons, at least about 60 to 70% of those inmates will be released within the next 2 to 3 years. So, and the programs that we are giving them now, it is effective. But if we put them in programs that is after they've been released, under more supervision, their chances of returning would be even less.
The program involves constant monitoring, consistent drug testing. Released prisoners will be placed in either schools or on jobs, and they must undergo at least a year of confined monitoring before they're even recommended to the parole board. That's the body that decides who's granted parole.
Bear in mind, now they even get into the parole program, right? It can take you a year of just internal classes, character building programs. And then if you are, successful, then we at the Bahamas Department of Corrections will pretty much recommend you to the parole board. And it is the parole board who will decide whether he or she is eligible to go on parole.
As for parole officers, Claire said a memorandum of understanding was recently signed with Canada and the United States for the training of proposed officers. He said that training will be extensive.
Just for example, the minimum requirements to be a parole officer in Canada is a bachelor's degree. So now I don't know if we'll be that stringent here, but no persons will be enrolled in the program unless they are fully trained and fully qualified and certified.
In news from the police tonight, investigations are ongoing into the latest homicide. Reports are that shortly after 10:30 Saturday night, a man was involved in an altercation with two men at Irish Springs Close off John Chipman Street when he was shot. The two suspects fled in a white Honda vehicle. That victim was pronounced dead on the scene, and police are asking anyone who may have information on this latest killing to contact 328-TIPS. Police are also searching for the suspects responsible for 3 armed robberies that happened yesterday. The first incident occurred shortly after 2 p.m. Police say a man was on a beach near a resort in western New Providence when 2 men armed with handguns approached and robbed him of cash and a gold chain. The suspects then shot the victim before running off. The victim was rushed to hospital where he remains in stable condition. Then about 15 minutes later, a woman was on Blake Road when 2 men armed with handguns approached her and robbed her of her handbag before running away. And then police say shortly after 4:30 Saturday afternoon, a man and a woman were walking along Soldier Road when they were approached by 2 armed gunmen who robbed them of cash and a pair of boots before fleeing on foot. And police on Grand Bahama have 3 men and a woman in custody who they believe were a part of a major firearm trafficking ring. Police say it was swift action by officers on that island that resulted in the seizure of 9 illegal handguns, along with a large amount of ammunition and several bulletproof vests yesterday. The public is also being asked to call or contact the police with information regarding the whereabouts of any illegal firearm. In other news, the Democratic National Alliance leader, Branville McCartney, says crime has become more of a concern every year since the Progressive Liberal Party took office in 2012, despite their campaign promises, which included controlling crime in the Bahamas. McCartney said the Christie administration wasn't serious about crime then, and they certainly aren't serious now. Here's Simone Davis.
The DNA leader says he believes much of the crime problem comes from the government interfering with the police. And he says he thinks as soon as that stops, then officers would be able to do their part in getting a better grip on the crime issue.
What they need to do is enforce our laws. What they need to do is stay out of the police business and let the police do their job and stop interfering with the police. What they need to do is to ensure that we have more courts, change the law, put more courts there that will deal with those heinous crimes, such as murder and rape. That's what they need to do.
He said the government should be more focused on strictly enforcing the laws than anything else.
When crime continue to be out of control, but yet they buying grenades. For what? What are you buying grenades for? Or getting grenades? What they need to do is enforce our laws.
Earlier this week, Minister of National Security Dr. Bernard Nottage announced the government was working on a new plan for the parole and probation program in an effort to buckle down on crime. McCartney asserted that more than that needs to be done.
Let's stop playing around. Work with the police, don't interfere with the police. When the police get you for crime, for murder, within a month that matter is being heard. Let's get the courts to specifically concentrate on the murder cases and the rape cases. And like I said, open up on Saturdays from 10 to 10 if you want to get it done.
Reporting for NB12 Weekend, I'm Simone Davis.
Now, for years in the Bahamas, we've known there to be standard or actual time, and then there's Bahamian time. No one likes to be late for work or events, but in the Bahamas, it kind of just happens. Tonight, NB12 takes a look at the decades-long trend that we've grown to call Bahamian Time. Here's Kyle Joaquin with the story.
There's being early, on time. You can be fashionably late, and then there's being early, on time. You can be fashionably late, and then...
So we took to Bay Street to see if we would find more culprits or victims of Bahamian Time.
Procrastinating, I guess. And just saying, okay, it don't matter if I'm 5 minutes late. That's what I always normally say.
And then 5 minutes turn into how long?
20, sometimes 30. 30 the most, yeah, most times.
Sometimes. I probably take more time than I should getting ready to go to a party, maybe. And I might show up at 10 instead of 8. Maybe. It happens.
There were also those who claim Bahamian Time doesn't apply to them.
I be on time, and my name is Irvin Taylor, because I drive a taxi. I have various amount appointments. Now, I heard a lot again about Bahamian Time. I don't too well go for that, because that could save your life. Time is of the essence.
No, I hate that. I hate being a Bahamian Time accomplice. No, I hate it. I've been taught a long time, you be on time. I don't care if it's British time, if it's Eastern time, if it's whatever, mountain time, be on time. Whatever time that is, you be on time.
We also decided to see how the nation's leaders handle time. Just as journalists do every Tuesday morning, we set up outside the Cabinet office, waiting to get interviews from willing government members. Cabinet meetings are usually set to start at 10 a.m., so we got stationed 40 minutes earlier. Out of the over 20 cabinet ministers, there was only one who was early, Foreign Affairs Minister Fred Mitchell, who came in at 9:30. Police were positioned outside the cabinet office, monitoring the activities in the vicinity of the cabinet's entrance. At 10 a.m. on the dot, in walks Agriculture Minister Alfred Gray. We also decided to see how the nation's leaders handle time. Just as journalists do every Tuesday morning, we set up outside the cabinet office, waiting to get interviews from willing government members. Cabinet meetings are usually set to start at 10 a.m., so we got stationed 40 minutes earlier. Out of the over 20 cabinet ministers, there was only one who was early, Foreign Affairs Minister Fred Mitchell, who came in at 9:30. Police were positioned outside the cabinet office, monitoring the activities in the vicinity of the cabinet's entrance. At 10 a.m. on the dot, in walks Agriculture Minister Alfred Gray.
Hey, Mr. Forbes. Morning. You late?
And the next day, we set up outside the House of Assembly, where elected officials debate and pass the laws of the land. Fox Hill MP Fred Mitchell was early once again, as well as Shane Gibson, Addison Key, Nico Grant, Melanie Griffin, Greg Moss, Glennis Hannah Martin, and Peter Turnquist. South Andros MP Picewell Forbes got in at 9:55, and Leader of Government Business in the House Dr. Bernard Nottage at 9:56. House of Assembly sittings don't start until he's there. But first of the late bunch was South Beach MP Cleola Hamilton, who walked in at 10:02. She was followed by V. Alfred Gray and Damian Gomez. At 10:09 was Seabreeze MP Hope Strawn with the Prime Minister right behind. A minute later, Opposition Leader Dr. Hubert Minnis walks in. He's followed by Michael Alkitis, who was kind enough to give us an interview.
Who I guess doubt your statement as to where the bad money's going.
Bambootown MP Renwood Walls got in 45 minutes late, and Marathon MP Jerome Fitzgerald 50 minutes late. But it appears Bahamian Time doesn't discriminate, even down to school children. On any given school day, you can drive past a public school at 9:20 a.m. and see students just lounging around outside the gate or even walking in the opposite direction of school. But to be fair, it must be admitted that even times we in the media are late. So there's no finger pointing here. For NB12 Weekend, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
And amid questions regarding the government's use of the revenue derived from value-added tax, State Minister of Finance Michael Halkitis says the government will give a full accounting of how much money was collected from VAT during the national budget communication in May.
In May, at the end of May, we'll have the budget, the national budget, which would, at that time, of course, we would have had almost a year and a half of VAT implementation. So we should be able to give a full report on, how much was collected, the whole administration, any tweaks that we're doing in terms of, making administration easier.
Recently, when Parliament debated a resolution to borrow $33 million from the Inter-American Development Bank, Alkitis explained a bit of where that money is going, but some, like DNA Deputy Leader Chris Mortimer, have questioned what exactly government has been doing. Alkitis told NB12 that as the State Minister of Finance, he understands that his job is to ensure there's transparency within the Ministry of Finance.
I'll reiterate again that all of the VAT revenue forms part of the general revenue of the government of the Bahamas that goes towards defraying a government expenditure, including paying down debt and paying interest. And so, my job is to just, people want information, continue to give information, and continue to stress that there's, everything is transparent.
The government introduced VAT at a rate of 7.5% in January of last year. Halkitis said government knows that there are people who won't be satisfied by their answer or explanation regardless.
That's all I can say. Of course, there might be some people who continually, the answer would not satisfy them, but it's very simple matter. The revenue goes towards the general revenue. Our deficits are coming down. We're on a trend of downward deficits, which will eventually lead to us, it already has led to us not having to borrow as much money on an annual basis that we do than we used to, which will then lead to a reduction in the debt. It's a long-term process.
And as it pertains to that budget debate in May?
I think it's going to be a very, very critical budget debate, being, I think, most likely the last full budget for this term. And so it will garner a lot of attention. But just to say to people, listen out, we're bringing the mid-year budget where we'll give an accounting. Then shortly after that, we'll bring the full budget.
When NB12 returns, the Chamber of Commerce expecting relief for businesses mired in complications over new licensing fees and taxes. And later, we count down the top clips in news this week. Those stories and more when we come right back.